Certainly, we know that the economy is going through a bit of a rough patch with persistent inflation, higher gas and food prices, and a bit of a softer labor market. So, how are those elements impacting families and, maybe more importantly, working mothers? Corinne Low is an associate professor of business economics and public policy here at the Wharton School. Corinne, great to catch up again.
Great to see you, Dan. So, yeah, you said it all. I mean, American families are feeling what I call the squeeze, which is about not just money, but also time. Because what they're finding is, costs are rising. They feel like they need to put more time into their careers. The demands that we place on parents have increased. The time we spent parenting has doubled across the span of a generation. And at the same time, childcare costs are rising. So a lot of families are saying, we can't afford not to have somebody in the labor market, but at the same time, it's hard for us to afford the childcare for somebody to go and work. So, they're in kind of a catch 22.
And really for women who are working mothers, you and I have talked over the last few years about the financial gap between what men are paid and women are paid. If you're a single working mother and you have all of these dynamics going on, and you throw in inflation and all these other components, it has to be one of the most challenging times that they have had, and maybe even more so than what we went through with the pandemic.
Yeah, that's right. Because when you think about what it costs to work, obviously you work to earn money, but what does it cost to work? Well, that's gas in the car, and gas prices right now are astonishing, right?
Yeah.
And that's childcare. And childcare, you talked about inflation. The cost of childcare has actually outpaced the cost of inflation. So childcare has actually increased more rapidly than the already punishing rate of inflation. And so, absolutely that is putting the squeeze on working mothers. And then when you get to the fact that women are paid less than men. If you are a, single working mom, you're supporting a family on that salary. Um, it's very, very difficult. And that's why I actually think it's so important. You remember the New York Times article a while back that was like, are
Yeah.
women ruining the workplace? And that's
Yeah.
why I think it's so important that we reframe, because so much of the discourse has treated women's work as though it's some kind of like optional hobby. Like, women are doing
Yeah.
it for feminism. They're doing it
Right.
because, they want to for their own self-fulfillment. But millions of women are supporting American families.
Yeah.
They're not working for fun. They're working to put food on the table. They're working to keep the lights on. And that's what gets lost when we talk about this dynamic as though it's optional. It's not optional. It's something that is so essential that we make possible, and that we figure out how to bring those costs down so
Right.
that families can continue to thrive.
Well, and then there are also the components, not only what they are dealing with in their jobs and their careers, but what they're dealing with at home as well, because a lot of the data says that working mothers are still contributing a lot, maybe even more so than their husbands if they're married, or their partners, uh, in the home setting, in terms of keeping everything kind of running, setting the doctor's appointments, the banking dynamics. It's so you add that on top of it, and it's even more challenging.
That's exactly right. So thanks for saying it for me so I didn't have to. That's my paper, Winning the Bread and Baking It Too. That
Yeah.
even women who are breadwinners, women who are the ones who are bringing home a significant paycheck and maybe even the sole earner in a household, they still do more. If they are married to a man, they still do more at home. They still do twice as much cooking and cleaning as their lower earning male partners. And that's one of the notes I want to make as we look at broader economic trends and economic change. And AI is really shaking up the labor market. And
Yeah.
it is shaking up our idea of who is going to be a high earner. Because you might have a couple where he is a computer programmer, she's a nurse, maybe he out earned her, right? But if those jobs go away, that earning
Yeah.
dynamic might shift, because healthcare, very AI proof industry, because it's about care, it's about being at the bedside. And so she's still going to be bringing home that paycheck. And the question is he ready to evolve into a new role of actually doing more at home?
Is it too early to truly understand what kind of impact that AI is having or will have in the future on the careers of working mothers?
I do think it's too early to understand, because I think personally, I think what we're going to see is that even though, some women's jobs are going to be displaced by AI, I actually think that a lot of the sectors that women work in, as I said, such as teaching, such as
Yeah.
healthcare, of course, those aren't all the jobs that women do. Women are professors like me, women are lawyers, women are all
Yeah.
sorts of things. But some of the sectors that women work in are more AI proof than some of the sectors that men work in. And as a result, as I said, I think what's really interesting is thinking about, are we prepared to reskill men to reconsider gender roles in light of potentially women's earning power within the household getting stronger over the next few decades with the rise of AI?
How has the work from home component played into the equation now? I mean, you and I talked about this during the pandemic and how it could potentially have an impact on women's careers. You've also written about the motherhood penalty. But how is that dynamic of work from home kind of evolving, do you think?
Well, we have seen a lot of companies are trying to drive return to office, right? And the reason is because so much research shows that there's things that happen when we are together in terms of idea sharing, in terms of innovation that just don't happen the same way at home. And so a lot of companies
Yeah.
are also considering hybrid models. And that's why, I have been encouraging firms to think, you know, if I want return to office, if I want the benefits of being together and synchronous, does that need to be, 8 a.m. till 9 p.m.? Or can I
Right.
get those benefits, from 10 to 4 of kind of core hours where we try to be in office, but then let people, take care of other things and let people kind of be more flexible for that second part of their
Yeah.
workload? And so I think that's some of the things companies might want to consider. But when we think about work from home, what's interesting is I think because when you're in the office, you're connecting with other humans.
Yeah.
And that's the piece that AI can't replace. I do think people should be thinking, if I am in a work from home job, I should be more worried that I'm more replaceable. The less human contact that I have, right, the more that I actually need to be concerned about the long term trajectory of this job category. So
Right.
I think we should be looking for ways to create more human connection, but we also shouldn't be sacrificing the very real need to do care labor and to do other types of production, like home production in our lives. And so that's about setting those boundaries on those in office times and not expecting it to kind of bleed into all hours.
So you mentioned a moment ago about men maybe adjusting how they are thinking about work and the workforce. But on larger scale, since we've had the pandemic and now we have this period of time, it made me wonder if families in general are thinking about and looking at ways where they potentially are tweaking their lifestyles longer term. Because I think a lot of us believe that while we're in this period of time now, there's probably another crisis that's going to come around the corner, maybe a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever it is down the line. And so I'm wondering if we're almost going through a little bit or getting ready for more transition in our lives.
Yes, I do think that we are looking at a period of economic turmoil ahead. And I think, again, from a gender perspective, since that's what I study, to be ready for that, you have to be ready to have either partner earn more, to have either partner be the one who's stepping up their hours in the labor force. And I think what makes us ready for that is being flexible in those gender roles. Is it being okay for dad to be the one to do pickups if, suddenly mom's career is more promising? It being
Yeah,
okay for dad to be the one who's doing the grocery shopping and the cooking. But the other things, just from a personal finance perspective, that American families should be thinking about right now, making sure that they have those emergency funds, making sure
yeah,
that they have those plans in case they do get laid off, right? And just thinking through that scenario because you want to think through it before it gets to you. So thinking, what would I do if I got laid off from my job? What places would I apply? Are my contacts active? Have I reached
yeah.
out recently and had some coffee chats with people, in my industry or in adjacent industries I'm interested in? So I think we can all afford to do a little bit of saving, not just of money for a rainy day, but saving up in terms of our contacts, our human capital, our relationship capital, so that we are prepared for a period of turmoil.
How are companies reacting to all this? Because you and I remember talking a while back about, companies adapting to a degree to the work from home and people having to deal with all the other dynamics in their life. As long as they were able to get their work done, they may be working more of a fractured work day, but they're still putting in their 8 hours. Maybe it's over the course of 12 hours. So are companies more receptive now than even before the pandemic about the dynamics of everything that's going on in people's lives right now?
Well, I think we see two opposing forces, right? One is that the pandemic did teach us that we can do a certain portion of our work asynchronously. So in the data, we do see a lot more work from home. We see a lot more hybrid models. People who even have in office jobs are not going to the office 5 days a week. They might be
Yeah,
going more like 4 days a week. So we just learned that some of this can happen over Zoom, but we also learned that there's some stuff that is not replaceable, and we don't want everybody working from home. And that's why a lot of companies have been doing return to office, right? But the opposing force, along with the firms learning and potentially, becoming more innovative in their structures, the opposing force is the soft labor market. And when you
sure.
have a soft labor market, firms have more bargaining power. And so we just saw Zoom and Deloitte cut maternity leave, and this is the first time we've heard of a big cut like this. What we've been hearing is firms adding benefits, firms saying that they are increasing their benefit package. Now, Zoom and Deloitte, two major companies, come out and say, you know what? We're scaling it back. We're cutting back the number of months we offer for maternity leave. We are cutting back on who is covered. Certain categories of employees are going to have fewer months than others. And I think the reason that they can do that is because of the soft labor market. And so
Yeah.
those two forces are going to be fighting each other, where on one hand, companies were making progress, but now they sense an opportunity that says, wait a minute, jobs are in demand. We can afford to spend a little bit less to recruit and retain our employees.
Corinne, great to talk to you again. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Dan. Always a pleasure.
Thank you. Corinne Low, Associate Professor of Business Economics and Public Policy here at the Wharton School.